Chapter 1. Love ended. Life didn't. Good morning, lie. I woke earlier than usual. It happens when something's off, though you can't quite name it yet. Or maybe you can, but you're busy pretending you don't. I heard him downstairs. That familiar asterisk meant he was skipping the coffee filter again, dumping grounds straight into the portafilter. A brilliant surgeon. Total domestic disaster. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking, Helen, just act as though it's fine. Maybe it'll pass you by. But the little voice, the one that always starts up while you in the gynecologist's waiting room, whispered, not this time. You already know. In the mirror, I saw a woman who used to laugh more. At herself. At him. In life. Now she mostly sighed. I put on the earrings, his 15-year wedding gift. Back then, he said,
You're like a diamond, rare and patient.
Turns out diamonds lose their sparkle. Especially when they're boxed up for too long. In the kitchen, he greeted me with that stock phrase.
Morning, Helen. Sleep okay?
Like I just ran through the spin cycle. I thought quietly. Out loud. Fine. You nodded, switched on the toaster. The routine, as flawless as his pressed shirt and hair, and tie. But the scent was off. Once tobacco and cedar. Now something sweet. Floral. Expensive. Unfamiliar. Got a meeting at the clinic today? I asked, eyeing the toast like a clue.
Yes. With Bergeret and Martin. Procurement.
I nodded. Noticed. Bergeret's on holiday. Martin works nights. He lied. Smoothly. Like he'd rehearsed it. I gulped my coffee, set the cup in the sink, and climbed upstairs. His tablet lay on the edge of the desk. He never left it behind, not even for a shower. Today, left. On purpose? Or tossed like a bone to a dog? The screen lit up. No passcode. Is it trust or arrogance? I don't know. Then, incoming call, Claire Martin. Just a name. No love, no emoji. He must have figured, strip away the decorations and the truth fades. It didn't. She existed. Between the lines. Between his steps. Between our nights. I didn't answer. I placed the tablet back. I'm no spy. And what for? The truth was sitting across from me, sipping her coffee and pretending not to meet my gaze. Chapter 2. A bag of bricks and a glass without Bordeaux. People at the clinic looked at me differently that week, some with pity, some worry, some with that deliberate, cowardly glance away, as if I'd suddenly turned into a walking cautionary tale. Diane, our head nurse, my 7-year straight partner in crime in drinking the same terrible vending machine coffee, had become prickly. Quiet. She kept whispering with her assistant and clamming up the second I walked by. Middle school all over again. She's coming. The strangest part? I didn't feel anger. Not at him. Not at them. Just exhaustion, the quiet, bone-deep kind. As if I'd been dragging a bag full of bricks for years and only now realized my arms were numb. Yet somehow I kept pulling. He got home late. Said it was an emergency surgery. He recited it with the enthusiasm of someone retelling their favorite movie. Details, technical terms, even hand gestures. He was good at lying. Professionally good. The kind of good you train for. And I nodded along, like always. Even though I knew there was no surgery. Just a script. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, remembering how we once built a life together, how he held my hand in the maternity ward, how we argued about bedroom wallpaper. How every Christmas the kids would bring home a pine cone, the magic one, and after they fell asleep, we'd swap it for a tiny lit Christmas tree. That was our ritual. We'd go to the park with a thermos of hot chocolate, searching for the perfect pine cone. Manon took it seriously, she believed. Jules rolled his eyes, called it nonsense, and still searched longer than anyone. We'd place the pine cone in a flower pot and pretend nothing unusual was happening. At bedtime, I told stories about forest spirits while he winked at me from behind the kids' backs. Then we'd pull out the little tree and decorate it in silence. He always got tangled in the lights. I always choked on laughter, fixing the ornaments. Every year, a new decoration joined the old ones. Little salt dough hearts, mismatched buttons, paper lanterns. Once, Manon hung a broken button, for luck. In the morning, they'd scream.
It grew. Look, It grew overnight.
Manon squealed. Jules tried to look unimpressed, but his eyes gave him away. And we stood behind them, arms around each other, believing, truly believing, that we were forever. When did it become an illusion? When he started turning his phone face down the moment I stepped out of the shower? When my hands stopped feeling like home? I didn't know. But I realized one thing. The hardest part wasn't the cheating. It was the silence. Silence sticks. It lingers in fabric, in rooms, in breath. It sinks into pillows he no longer touches. Claire Martin wasn't the villain. She didn't steal anything. She just stepped into a crack we had both pretended not to see. And now I sit by the window, sipping wine. Not Bordeaux, just some table red. Bordeaux belonged to them. To another life. This one has no label. And I think, Helen, enough pretending. You already know everything. The question isn't, how much does it hurt? It's, what are you going to do with that truth? Chapter 3. The walrus left. The cold remained. That Sunday smelled of iron, pears, and something rotten, just like the Sundays before. And the ones before those. We sat at the table, the four of us, me, him, Jules, and Manon. Everything looked right. Tablecloth, roast chicken, spotless glasses. But the feeling that someone in the family was quietly strangling someone else never left for a minute.
Dad, are you really staying with us today?
Asked Manon, twirling her fork. He smiled. Hesitated. For a split second.
Of course. All day. Why would I?
He said.
Just.
She shrugged.
Sometimes you say yes, then you walk away.
He laughed. But poorly. Like someone caught in a lie who shrugs and says it's just a misunderstanding. Or a joke. I said nothing. No words needed. The kids already knew. Even if they didn't know what exactly. Jules buried his head in his phone. I pretended not to notice. He wouldn't have done that before. But now, he did. Because he sensed power. Or because he chose a side. Not mine.
Mom, you overfried the potatoes again.
He said without looking up. I didn't answer. Let him think it's about potatoes. Let him have that simple excuse. Unlike mine. After lunch, I stayed in the kitchen, alone. Washing dishes with disgust. Also a ritual now. In the sink lay a fork, half gnawed, like my nerves. I stared at it and thought, how did it all get so sticky? As if someone spilled syrup from the past and forgot to wipe it up. I remembered one of our very first Sunday dinners, before the kids. A tiny apartment, folding chairs, IKEA glasses. We ate on our knees, dreamed of the sea. He played a walrus, sticking raw spaghetti into the corners of his mouth. I laughed myself into hiccups, and he said,
Remember me like this. Pastor in panic.
Now Sunday felt like a test. Who said what? Who kept quiet? How many times has someone said Mom with a tinge of reproach? Even Manon's voice carried something cold. A tone she couldn't have come up with herself. Someone taught her. Or infected her. Late at night, I checked on the kids. Manon was already asleep, hugging a plush fox. His name was Remy. I sewed his tail back on once. Then, he whispered.
Oh, darling, you can probably fix anything in the world.
And he looked at me like no one else ever did. I lingered a second. Right now, he'd probably say.
You can fix everything, but our marriage.
If he said anything useful at all. Jules lay there in his headphones, acting like he didn't see me. Good night, I whispered. He didn't respond. But his phone screen went dark instantly. I left the room and closed the door quietly. No sound. Like feelings you can't find words for any longer. Chapter 4. Sure, I'm burnt out. How about you? The next morning at the clinic felt off. Everyone was polite. Way too polite. As if I'd become a fragile museum vase. Okay to look at, not okay to touch. I saw Brigitte, our admin, quickly roll up a document as I entered. They were definitely talking about something personal. Or me. Which, by now, seemed the same thing. Everything all right? I asked, looking her straight in the eye. Of course. She answered. Of course. But that, of course, sounded like she was holding back tears for someone else's pain she suddenly decided to adopt as her own. I walked into the office. Scanned the patient list. My hand trembled. There it was. A name. Bernard. Too familiar. He was the man my husband claimed to have met at medical conferences. I once called him, and he didn't know my husband had supposedly had dinner with him last night. He was in Lyon. My husband? In her apartment. Yes. I knew now. I knew he lied. I knew behind his schedule, his calls, his operations, there was this story. But then what? And suddenly I remembered how he used to get jealous of Pierre. My childhood friend. Our messages, our rare meetings with sea breeze laughter. He'd have scenes when I just laughed at an old Pierre joke.
You're flirting with him.
He'd said. And I stopped writing. Stopped calling. Because I loved Philippe. Because I wanted peace. Because back then, I thought, for love, you can be silent. You can refuse. You can bend. Now I felt like hearing Pierre's voice. Not to complain. Not to punish. But simply to check. He's still there, right? That someone from the past stayed unchanged. So I wrote to him. Chapter 5. Soup, shame, and a list of lawyers. It all started with the slam of a door, a slam that leaves its echo not in the house but deep in your chest. Jules burst into the kitchen, clutching something in his hand, his cheeks blazing, his eyes firing lightning bolts as though he had just fought a war. Or was just about to.
Is it true?
He shouted, like he was center stage in a courtroom drama.
You're getting divorced?
I stood by the stove, spoon in hand. My head rang. Not from his words but how he said them, as though they were a verdict. What makes you think that? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. He flung a paper onto the table. A printout. A Xerox. One sheet. A plain legal form with my name on it. He had found it.
I was looking for my notebook. In the drawer. Why didn't you tell us? You were hiding this from us.
Because you're children, Jules. Because I was trying to protect you.
Right.
He yelled.
So you're just going to spring it on us. Now we live wherever someone says? Like unwanted suitcases?
I tried to speak, but at that moment, Manon walked in. In her pajamas, her hair a mess, clutching her doll.
Mommy, Jules is yelling. He said you want to leave us. Is it true?
And then the floor felt like it dropped out from under me. Not because of the yelling. Because I realized, he, their father, had already made his move. He had already said his piece. He had imprinted on me the label, Mom who leaves. It was cruel, dirty, brutal, and flawless. Because children don't listen. They feel. And if you don't speak, someone else will. I'm not leaving you, Manon, I said, squatting down in front of her. I'm just trying to figure out how all of us will be better.
Better?
She said, voice trembling.
Better like we live without Dad? Or without you?
I want you to live with both of us, baby.
But Dad said you don't want us anymore.
She shouted and yanked away. Jules stood silent, watching. And in his gaze, there were no questions anymore. Something else. That doesn't shout. That lingers. That settles. Like dust you didn't notice at first, and then you can't get rid of. And in that moment, I remembered how Philippe Faust became a father. Hospital ward. White walls. I was in a gown, hair wet, all tension compressed like a spring. And yet calm, because he was there. He sat on a plastic chair and held my hand as if he feared I might vanish. Two interns walked in. One young guy with headphones and a smug face looked at me and asked,
Why are you yelling? It's a natural process.
I turned my head, squinted, and exhaled. Stick an umbrella in your ass and open it. Then let's talk about natural. Philippe straightened up, looked at him as a surgeon looks at a student who mistook an artery for a vein, and barked.
Get out. Both of you.
The interns vanished in less than 3 seconds. Then he sat again and said to me,
Only you could give a heart attack to people who've seen blood up to their necks. You're incredible.
And I was giving birth. Every breath was a march uphill. Every push, a fight with a hurricane. It was terrifying, painful, but I felt safe. He was with me. He wiped my forehead and said I'd do it. And I did. When Jules yelled, he exhaled like someone reborn. Then he leaned toward me and whispered,
You're the hero. I've never been so proud of anyone.
And I believed it. Exhausted, spent, but happy. And now the hero, Jules, stood in front of me and judged me. Me. And his father, no longer the protector, but the instigator. I opened my mouth, closed it. My mind was blank. Only the pulse. Only nausea, that pre-vomit feeling. I wanted to say, your father is cheating on me. I found out from the tablet, not from him. I didn't crash the family. I was trying to save it. But I didn't speak. Because truth, it doesn't heal. It cuts. Especially kids. And I couldn't bring myself to strike that blow. I love you, the only thing I said. Jules turned away. Manon ran to her room and slammed the door. I stayed behind, spoon in hand, in the kitchen that still smelled of half-eaten dinner. And do you know what the worst part is? I didn't just feel pain. I felt shame. As though this truth was my fault. Even though I knew for sure, I didn't leave. I held on. Till the end. Shame for staying silent. Shame for letting him speak first. Shame for now, my children, not entirely mine. I thought of his mother. Of Marie-Therese. How she looked at me when I entered their family. No suspicion. No jealousy. With a kindness as if I were the daughter she'd been waiting for. We spent many evenings together in that kitchen. Tea with honey, endless talk. Children, work, men, stubborn stains on tablecloths. When she got sick, I was there. To the end. I knew which days were the hardest. I knew how to squeeze her hand to ease pain when it flooded. One evening, she said to me,
"If it ever gets too hard, Helen, don't give up. Just don't give up."
"What if I get tired?" I asked. She gently smiled, patted my head as she used to when I was really hurting.
"Then sit down, drink coffee, and tell yourself, I'm not who I was yesterday. But I'm still good. You'll be happy, my girl."
I stepped out onto the balcony. Breathed deep. The night was warm. Cars hummed somewhere far away. I looked down at the streetlights glow and thought, if pain had a smell, it would smell like burnt sugar. Sweet and burning. I pulled out my phone. And messaged Pierre. "You busy?" I just need a little quiet. Not in a room. In my head. His reply came quickly.
"Come over. Let's just be quiet together. Who the hell needs friends anyway?"
I smiled. For the first time in weeks. No guilt. No fear. Just real. Chapter 6. He was late. I left inside. A few days before my children officially declared Mom enemy of the nation in our family soap opera, I stood in the clinic office, the one whose cabinets I knew blind, and calmly told my husband he could be happy without me. That evening, the clinic felt especially quiet. The hum of the ventilation is louder than usual. Even footsteps in the corridor sounded out of place. I stood at the reception window with a plain folder in my hand, nothing remarkable. But inside, everything drummed like a storm about to break. Not just the files, the thoughts. Not just the paper, the decisions I was about to voice. Philippe entered the office, late as usual, but tonight there was no familiar excuse. His stride was steady. The rumors, the calls, the altered routes, they all merged into his posture. He had chosen silence as a weapon.
Helen, you here after 6 again?
He asked, voice flat, eyes still on the report. "Yes," I said, calmly. "There are things we need to talk about." He said nothing. At that moment, betrayal felt tangible, like a shadow standing in front of me, not just behind me. I remembered how it all began. For my birthday, he gave me perfume, a heart-shaped bottle. The scent, sweet, powdery, just a touch too cloying. I was surprised. Philippe had never given me perfume before. And interestingly, never asked what scents I like. But I thanked him. And I wore it to work, giving that perfume a chance. Then one day, while I filled out charts at the front desk, a chatty 70-something patient, blessed with perfect comedic timing, said,
"Well, fancy that. You two even like the same scent. I swear the doctor's assistant wears it constantly."
I raised an eyebrow.
"That one, right? The strong, sweet one. My daughter gifts it to me every Mother's Day. I guess she thinks it's classic."
I smiled politely, like a friend at a family dinner would. But inside, something snapped. He didn't guess. He didn't pick for me. He covered his tracks. So no more questions about whose scent clung to his collar. I placed the folder on the desk. It trembled slightly, as though the document feared being read. Inside, messages, bills, photos, all the things you cannot chalk up to fake conferences or late shifts. Is it true? I asked, breathing deep. He looked at me. His face was calm, expressionless almost, but his eyes told the story.
What exactly do you want to know?
He asked, hesitantly. Everything. How long? How many knew? Why did nobody say a thing? In his face, I read the answer. The colleagues knew everything. They stopped laughing when I walked in. Conversations ended the moment I appeared in the corridor. Nurses avoided my gaze. Someone always found an urgent task elsewhere. Diane, my Diane, who for years shared terrible coffee with me, now spoke in whispers, never meeting my eyes when Philippe answered a call. Admins exchanged glances when he was once more held up in surgery. They weren't villains. They were just afraid of being the ones who told the truth. We used to mark birthdays in the staff room, drinking cheap champagne from plastic cups, laughing like school kids. Now, silence. So loud you heard the drip of the coffee machine. So heavy your temples throbbed. The colleagues averted their eyes, and it hit me. Silence can be betrayal, too. I recalled the day the cleaning woman stopped by my desk and said, looking at Philippe staring into the office of his mistress.
I thought you already knew, ma'am. It's been visible for ages. I'm so sorry for you. We've all been there.
My heart twisted. To see myself through the eyes of those who saw it all, yet said nothing. I even remembered the day I first met Claire, not yet knowing who she was. She walked into the clinic in a champagne-colored blouse, insouciant, just got up like this hairdo and a smile you recognized as learned, not genuine.
Excuse me, where's the waiting area?
She asked. That'd be the one filled with coffee and fear, I answered, not taking my eyes off the screen. She laughed, clear, theatrical. I smiled in return. And that was it. I even escorted her to his office. His office. My husband's. Sometimes, remembering that, I think, maybe the universe tried to whisper. But I was busy. Living. Trusting. Working. Making shopping lists. Braiding pigtails. Memoizing which drawer held his favorite socks. Always saving him the last piece of camembert. Not because I loved the cheese, but because I loved him. I took the evidence I did have, printouts, messages, photos, and laid them on the table between us, like a map on which all the moves had already been played. I want a divorce, I said. His eyebrows shot up. Not surprised, afraid. You'll get your freedom, Philippe. That's what you wanted, right? I continued. Freedom from commitments. From me. From the family. Take the house. Take the clinic. Take the children. I'll pay the alimony. You'll get what men usually get after divorce, a second youth. And I paused. I'm choosing honesty. And lightness. At least this time. The evening before, I talked it through with the lawyer. Metra Lambert sat across from me, pushing her glasses up, and asked.
Helen, what do you really want?
I gripped my hands to stop them from trembling and said, I want him to understand what it's like when one person, after the divorce, gets the freedom, the youth, the weekends without kids, and the other ends up with a broken heart, other people's tears, anxieties, parent-teacher meetings, and questions with no answer. This is unfair. And dishonest. She nodded.
Then let's do it this way.
She said.
Offer him the house, the clinic, the children, and tell him you're ready to pay alimony. He'll panic. He won't be ready. He's used to another scenario, and you will see his real face.
My heart squeezed. But I'm not leaving the kids, I said quietly.
Of course not. We are just giving him a taste of freedom, until he understands how bitter it can be.
He turned pale. He didn't like the role of the loser.
Helen.
He said softly.
What do you imagine? You don't know what you're doing.
I know I deserve better, I replied. And I know I'm not alone. Just then, Pierre called. I didn't pick up. A few minutes later, a text, hang in there. I'm with you. And for perhaps the first time since this nightmare began, I felt someone saw me, not as a surgeon's wife, not as a mother, not as the clinic manager, but as a person. I stepped onto the clinic balcony, inhaled the cool night air. In my head, pain, betrayal, but also that strange taste of freedom. I looked out at the sleeping city and thought, you are not forgotten. You are strong. You can start over. Chapter 7. Crunchy baguette and a fragile mom. The next morning I woke up before the alarm. The house breathed quietly, like a large, tired beast. In the room hung the scent of yesterday's brewed coffee and that faint perfume I could no longer wear. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, and thought, has it all already happened? My brain demanded action. Breakfast to make, backpacks to check, wake the kids. But my body refused to move. As if everything that had been, the talk at the clinic, Philippe's face, the text from Pierre, stayed outside. And I stayed inside, disconnected from the system. Yet life demanded its due. In 15 minutes, the kitchen would host a son complaining about everything, and a daughter expecting me to braid her hair like Dad always did. I stood up, switched on the coffee maker, poured the cereal. Everything, like a script written by someone else. Jules came first.
Dad said you want us to live with him.
He said, not looking at me. His words cut. I didn't even know how to answer right away. I'd thought we'd have time to explain. Gently, gradually. We'll talk tonight, I told him, trying to remain calm. He snorted and poured himself milk. My daughter came next. Pajamas wrinkled, doll tucked under her arm.
You're bad.
She announced without an introduction.
Dad cried last night.
I exhaled. I know you're hurting now. But we'll try to go through this, together.
He said you don't love us anymore.
She added, burying her face into her doll. I crouched down beside her. I love you. Very much. And I love your dad, in my own way. Sometimes grown ups stop being happy together. That doesn't mean one of them has become bad. Though yes, someone really acted like a bastard. But we'll save that story for later. Jules snorted.
If you hadn't yelled, he wouldn't have left.
I said nothing. When they left, I sat at the table and finished my coffee, cold now. I wanted to call someone. But who? My mom, and I'd cry. Diane, she's no longer stuck between fires. She's closer to him now. Pierre? He had already written.
Whenever you're ready, just say the word. I'm here.
His words were like a blanket. Or a glass of wine. Or ice cream while watching a series about someone who broke everything and then got better. Only it wasn't a comedy. It was my life. And I realized, from here, only forward. At lunch, I walked to the bakery just so I wouldn't sit in silence. I bought a baguette, which remained untouched later. The bread felt too crunchy for my nervous system. On the way back, I ran into the neighbor. As always, she carried shopping bags and fresh gossip.
Saw your husband with the kids yesterday.
She began instead of hello.
He's trying, of course. But you know, kids should live with their mother.
Before I could say anything, she continued.
Or did you ask him to leave? Because he looked like he hadn't slept.
Do you often sleep with my husband to know that much? I asked, smiling politely, poison sharp. The neighbor blushed and marched off. Her bags rustled indignantly. At home, I gave myself a real cleanup. Not the top surfaces kind, the real kind. With a rag, boxes, and bags for charity. In the wardrobe, I found the card Philippe gave me on our anniversary. One of those boilerplate texts about a lifetime of love. I didn't tear it up. I simply put it away. Like a letter delivered to the wrong address. When the kids returned, they were on guard. Jules threw his bag onto the floor and walked to his room, slamming the door. My daughter came up and asked if I'd like to watch a cartoon with her. I agreed. We sat on the couch. She leaned on me, like in the evenings when she was very little. At some point, she asked,
Mom, are you sad now?
Sometimes, I replied. But it passes.
And when you laugh, I'm not scared.
She said.
Even if Dad says you'll leave us.
I stood up, sat in front of her on my knees, and took her face in my hands. I will never leave you. Not you or Jules. Dad may have been wrong. And I may have been wrong. But you too, you're the best thing we have. She hugged me tight, as tightly as she could. I felt something stir inside. Not pain, but strength. Here it was, my army, a girl with her doll and a boy with his grievances. And me, their shield. That evening, Pierre called. This time I answered.
How are you?
He asked. Like a marshmallow in boiling water, I replied. He laughed.
Then you're still holding on.
Later, when the house slept, I sat on the balcony, wrapped in a throw, holding a mug of too hot tea, like everything else around me. The city slept. And I did not. All thoughts spun at once. Fear, anger, hope, and a grocery list. Sometimes I seriously wondered, maybe if I switched to avocado and shampoo, the pain would just go away? I thought of Pierre as the person with whom I could talk about why kids are both beautiful and unbearable. And why can't grown-ups just opt not to betray? I sighed. Again. And I decided, tomorrow I'll start talking. Not staying silent. Not smiling through my teeth. But talking. About how it is. Chapter 8. Dad can make omelets. I can make freedom. In the morning, I took my daughter to school. She bounced along and told me that one of her classmates blew a huge bubble from his nose on a dare. Maybe he's stressed? I suggested.
No, he's just weird.
She shrugged. I smiled. Life is pain, sure, but with kids, it's also a TV show full of unexpected plot twists. When I got back home, the neighbor was loitering by the entrance again. This time with a basket of apples and the expression of a judge.
You know,
She began.
I do wonder, are you doing the right thing?
Seriously? I said, pulling out my keys already. Is there a cue for judgments here?
I'm just, as one woman to another.
As one woman to another, I'd recommend you change the channel. You airing drama from 10 years ago. The neighbor snorted and disappeared into the lobby. Her apples swayed indignantly. That evening I watched a ballet recital. My daughter played a snowflake and kept glancing at the camera. Jules sat beside us, pretending he didn't care, but when the music began, he stayed.
You know,
He muttered.
Dad can make an omelette too, but it's not as good.
I didn't answer. I simply placed my hand on his shoulder. Later, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the kitchen and finally answered the phone when Pierre called.
You alive?
He asked. Almost. But if one more person tells me everything's going to be okay, I will start killing people. He laughed.
I'll drop by tomorrow. Want croissants?
Only if with chocolate.
Not sure I can manage that.
I smiled. Not like the heroine of a rom-com, but like someone who survived. And now no, even a marshmallow in boiling water can float. Chapter 9. When Dad Learns to Parent. Pilot episode. When Philippe said he wanted to talk, I almost asked if he'd put on his tie just for the occasion. He stood at the door like an undercover agent, flowers in one hand, a box of chocolates in the other, and the look of a man who'd decided, for the first time, to be a father.
How about we spend a day together with the kids?
He offered, eyes fixed on the floor. Sure, I replied. If you've suddenly mastered the art of taming moody teens and tiny princesses. He smiled. That kind of smile you wear when you try on someone else's uniform and realize it doesn't fit. Jules was pleased. Pizza, movie, no math homework. My daughter? In love, especially when Dad agreed to be the patient in her vet clinic game and listened to our cat's diagnosis patiently.
He does everything weird.
She whispered to me.
But he does. And you're always busy.
And there it was. Small. True. Right in the heart. A couple of days later, I got a call from the school. Parents' meeting. Quarter-end reports. Philippe decided to go too. Apparently, he felt it was time to remind the kids he was still the responsible parent. We arrived together, but separately, I, with a notebook full of teacher questions. Him, with the stance of a man rushing to a boardroom meeting. The classroom smelled of whiteboard markers, dusty mop cloths, and kid socks. Chairs creaked. The air hovered heavy, like before a storm. While the teacher talked about Jules's behavior, a girl from the parallel class peeked in. Blonde hair, stubborn fringe, an apple in her hand.
Mom, you coming?
She asked, looking in. A woman in a light coat followed her. She nodded at her, but froze when she saw Philippe. Jules looked at the girl. Then at Philippe. Then at me.
We know each other.
He said quietly.
She was at our house. With her mom. Last year.
Philippe tensed. I felt it, even through the chair between us.
He was younger then.
He whispered, barely opening his mouth.
I thought he forgot.
I said nothing. But Jules said plenty. With his silence. That night, he asked.
Mom, why didn't you tell me that he is seeing someone?
I looked at him. Because you're my son, not the judge. And it's important you know, love can end. But respect doesn't. He nodded. So grown up. Too grown up. I went to the kitchen, made tea. Found an old chipped mug in the cupboard and thought, how symbolic. You can still drink from it, just more carefully. Later that evening, the kids made themselves comfortable on the sofa, daughter clutching her doll, Jules wrapped in a blanket. I sat between them. Not the perfect mom. Not a martyr. Not a hero. Just a person. In her own home. With her own truth. And a different life is already beginning. Chapter 10. Start over. A dad's instruction manual. Philippe walked in that morning with papers in his hands and the look of a man who suddenly realizes he could lose everything. He stood at the threshold holding a school report with grades, attendance, and remarks.
I want us to try starting over.
He said, his voice wavering just a bit more than it should. I looked at him like someone seeing a man scared for the first time, not scared of the job, but of the mask he set on. Start with what? I asked calmly. He turned away, as if he feared the kids would hear his weakness. Grades. Behavior. Our classroom. And they, on the last page, a line from his teacher.
Jules often stays silent, doesn't respond, and goes home with a worried look. Possible smoking began.
I saw Philippe flinch. Like he'd taken a blow. You saw this? I asked. He nodded, without looking at me.
Do they know everything?
He whispered. Yes. Your daughter, Jules, they see you. Read between the lines. Hear you. I sighed. Not the ideal. Just a man. He sat on the edge of the couch. The paper trembled in his hands like a leaf in the wind. I watched the panic flicker in his eyes.
And what about the work schedule?
He asked, looking up at me as though waiting for a blueprint on how to live next.
I don't know how to be a dad.
He said almost inaudibly.
A dad whom kids aren't afraid to mess up in front of.
I leaned in. You'll learn. Just like I do. And they already see you trying. That's step one. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath.
Everything I did was out of fear. Fear of losing respect. Fear you alone would judge me. Fear that kids would hear even what I whisper.
I said nothing. I just looked at him. Chapter 11. The cup cracked. I didn't. The kids came home from school. My daughter immediately asked.
Mom, why did the teacher say you're the strongest one here, that you'll hold us all together?
Jules listened silently.
And Dad said something about starting over. Is that true?
She asked. Philippe opened his mouth like he was about to say something important, then shut it. The daughter stared at him.
And if you try and it doesn't work?
She said gently.
Will you be okay?
He looked at her. At Jules. Then at me.
I don't know.
He said.
I'm scared.
Jules suddenly turned to me.
Mom, you're scared less now, right?
I smiled and hugged him. I'm not scared. I'm learning. At lunch, I went to the pharmacy, bought the vitamins Pierre recommended for nerves. At home, I found Philippe at his desk trying to map out who does what in the morning, dinner, homework, and weekends. He wrote, Mom on Saturday, walk. Then crossed it out. I don't want you to plan everything, I said.
I'm trying.
He replied. Planning isn't being there. He said nothing. Then, almost offhand.
Claire isn't answering anymore. Messages, calls, letters, nothing. Maybe it's a way to say goodbye. Or punish.
I didn't reply. He exhaled.
I'm not ready for your terms. I thought, maybe you'd change your mind. I was wrong. And maybe I don't know how to love right. But I know how to miss.
Missing doesn't mean changing. I moved close. You want me to go back to being the one who holds everyone together, only now scheduled. He dropped his eyes. The paper shook like that same flapping leaf.
I just don't know how to be. You always knew.
No, I said softly. I just stayed silent. He looked at me, for the first time unguarded.
You're leaving?
I nodded. I'm choosing myself. No more plans. No more maybe it'll work. No more what if. He slumped at the edge of the sofa.
What about the kids?
They'll stay with both of us. But I'm not going to patch cracks in the family cup anymore if you pick up the hammer. He tried a smile. It didn't work.
You really think you're better than all of us?
He asked, voice not only desperate but hurt.
That you alone have the right to leave and call it freedom? That's selfish, Helen. Just wrapped prettier.
I didn't flinch. I just exhaled quietly. Am I tearing down the house? Me? I asked softly. No, Philippe. I'm just clearing out the ruins you left behind. I picked up my mug, the one with the crack. Put it on the shelf. Let it sit. Life's not a display case. Even a cracked mug can warm your hands. Chapter 12. 3 months later. The cat had rummaged through the flower pots again. Earth spread across the floor like someone's forgotten memories. I grabbed gloves and a watering can. That plant of mine needed repotting anyway. Manon gave it to me for my birthday. Bright leaves shaped like hearts and a resilience others envied. I placed a new pot and filled it with soil, when Jules came up silently and wrapped his arms around my waist without a word. He stood next to me. I dropped a little soil on the rug, and the cat plunged its nose in as if checking the job. It snorted in approval and walked off, like a true gardening and motherhood expert. Work. I'm not at that clinic anymore. I found a small consultancy where appointments end at 5, and after work, there's often time for home, kids, and silence. Yes, the load is still there, but I go home not with fear of what's undone, but with the certainty I did everything I could today. Philippe picks up the kids from school on Tuesdays and Fridays. Sometimes he stays for dinner, helps with homework. Now he asks,
How are you?
And he listens. One evening, he stood by the window, watching the streetlights, and said,
I never thought freedom would mean so much responsibility.
I smiled. He hadn't expected silence. But that too was an answer. The evening was warm, even though autumn was breathing rain outside. Manon sat on my lap, cheeks slightly pink from the tea I poured before bed.
Mom,
She said suddenly.
now you laugh as nicely as when I was little.
I was surprised. A simple phrase, but powerful. A kid notices not what you do but who you have become. I hugged her. Jules had already gone to his room, but peeked in occasionally. His eyes were full of quiet understanding. My son had grown up. Chapter 13. Broken? Try tea. The night had passed. I was sitting on the balcony, quiet, the scent of tea in the air, street lights reflecting in the wet asphalt. In my hands, a cup with a crack, but still warm. Just like me. And suddenly I understood. Everything a woman does while she's doing it seems invisible. Ordinary. Taken for granted. The mother who gets up before everyone to make breakfast. The wife who smooths over an argument first, just because someone has to. The woman who holds together the house, the schedules, the teas, the grocery lists, and the relationships. I was that one. The one who lived through the storm, the collapse of our family, cooking soup and syncing school calendars. No one frees you from your duties, even when you're breaking inside, and you do what you can, even as you fall. As long as she smiles, no one asks if she wants to. If it hurts. If it's too much. As long as she's holding it together, everyone assumes that's just how it's meant to be. And when she can no longer, the world stares as the system has failed. But a woman is not a system. Not a background process. Not someone else's resilience quota. She's a human being. And if you're hearing this, remember yourself. The one who endured. Who held on. Who loved, froze, and still kept walking. Not because she had to, but because she believed in them. In herself. In love. Share your story. Not so someone will say, you were right, or you're strong. But because words are bridges. When you speak, you hear yourself. I remembered what Maritis once said to me as we sat in the kitchen.
You're not the same as you were yesterday, but you're still here, and you will be happy.
Back then, I didn't fully get it. Now, I do. Now I'll say it to Manon when she grows up. So she can one day pass it on, when she becomes the woman who loves, who holds, who is.